Hey guys, welcome to another Supernatural Saturday. Chief is in the room again. I don't know, he likes it in here, so what are you gonna do? So as you can tell by the title of this video, we are talking about the Bélmez faces, which were discovered in Spain. Let's go ahead and jump straight into the story. In August of 1971, a woman named Maria Gomez Pereira, I believe that's how you say her last name, I apologize. She began noticing some staining on her kitchen floor, and naturally she began trying to clean it, all kinds of different chemical agents and scrubbers, and she wasn't able to get these stains up. And after a while, the stain started getting more and more prominent, and it ended up looking like a face. Now, naturally, this unsettled Maria. She did not want it in her house anymore, so she enlisted the help of her husband Juan and their son. They took a pickaxe to this stain, completely removed the flooring in the kitchen, and poured some new concrete. Now, everything went back to normal for about a week until the stain came back. And it was the exact same stain, same face, nothing had changed. Maria again attempts to clean it and nothing is helping. And at this point, this little town in Spain began getting very, very superstitious and chatty about this face in the floor of Maria's home. And word ended up even spreading to the mayor of the town. The mayor ended up ordering that this face not be destroyed. He wanted to send it off for testing to a very reputable company, and they also wanted to, just on the safe side, go ahead and excavate the kitchen just to make sure that nothing underneath could have been leaking up to create this staining. Now, to their absolute horror, about 10 feet underneath the kitchen, they found multiple skeletons. A lot of these skeletons also were missing their heads. Don't worry, this family were not murderers. They did testing on the skeletons and found out that they were roughly 700 years old. Now, believing that this was possibly the cause of the face that was found on the concrete, they decided to take these bones and lay them to rest properly in a Catholic cemetery. Believing this was the end of it, they filled in the kitchen hole and poured fresh concrete over it, and all was well for about 2 weeks again, until the face came back. And this time, it was not the same face. It was a different face, different expression, and over time, more faces began popping up. It was no longer just one face, there were multiples. And the creepy thing about it is the faces seemed to change and morph and move. They were not staying in one spot. Now again, Maria tries to clean these faces off of her floor. She is very unnerved at this point, as anyone would be. Now there's multiple faces popping up and they're moving and changing, and that's just creepy. So she's trying to clean them and nothing is pulling these stains out of the concrete. Nothing that she was using could get these stains out. And it was even said that these faces would change and morph sometimes in a matter of mere hours. They were changing so quickly. Now, because of this, reports of the faces and this home began spreading like wildfire, not only in this little town of Spain, but throughout Europe. And it even started gaining traction in Germany, where a very renowned paranormal investigator named Dr. Hans Bender took a very special interest in this case and decided to investigate it for himself. Dr. Hans Bender also cited that this activity was the most important case of the century. That's how much he believed in this case and how much he wanted to investigate it and get to the bottom of what was causing these faces. Now, at this time, people began flocking to the home in droves, trying to catch a glimpse of these faces. Now, this house even earned the nickname La Casa de las Caras, which is the house of faces. And it just enticed all these people to come and start trying to catch a glimpse. And at this point, after being hounded and harassed by literally hundreds of people trying to get into this family's their home. They lived here. This was not like a museum or somewhere you could just go to visit. this was a family's personal home. So after a while, they ended up charging admission so that people could come into their kitchen and look at the faces and then get out. And this also became the center of a very big controversy for the family. People started thinking that they were only charging admission because that was their plan the whole time. They thought that they created these faces as a hoax to get people to come, and they wanted to make money off of this. Now, my counter argument for that is, if that was the plan the whole time, why weren't they charging admission the entire time? And why were they were so behind all of this testing. Now, you guys, we're about to get into all of the testing that these faces went through, and the family the entire time just wanted help. They constantly said, like, yes, take pieces, go test it. We want to know what's going on, because they were freaked out themselves. They had to live in this home. And if it's a hoax, wouldn't you think they would be not okay with actual scientific testing? I find it hard to believe that they created this hoax. And there's also controversy that they think the town was also behind it, and that's how they were able to have influence and tell these other companies that were doing the testing to falsify their reports. I think that's a stretch. That sounds like a big old conspiracy theory to me, but that's just my opinion. Now, in 1990, samples from 2 of these faces were sent off to a lab called the Instituto de Ceramica y Vidrio, or ICV for short. And this lab studied these 2 samples and found that no dyes, no chemicals, no paints, nothing was used in the creation of these faces. They were just forming, and this lab could not explain how they were forming. Because of all of this, and because the lab had come back and saying that they were inconclusive and they could not prove that these faces were created by any kind of chemical or dye that we knew about, obviously people started wondering, is it a hoax or not? Because it seems pretty credible that a lab is not able to prove that these were faked or falsified in any way. So a German TV crew, while supervised by dignitaries of the town, began conducting an experiment. And they took photographs of the entire kitchen floor, every single face, even spaces that did not have faces. They took pictures of everything. And then they began sealing off the floor. And they laid a whole tarp down, they sealed all the edges, and they even sealed the windows and the doors to make sure nobody had access, and also no elements could come in, like rain or water or anything, to create more stains or change the stains. They just wanted to prove that it wasn't a natural thing that was happening, and also people weren't manipulating or painting these faces on. When they came back to check and lift up the tarp, the faces had changed and moved. Even though nobody had access to this room, nobody was able to go in or out, and it was proven nothing was tampered with, but still the faces were changing. Now, so many experiments have taken place trying to prove or disprove that this is a hoax, and every single test has come back either inconclusive or just unable to prove that something was used. And there's so many theories on what possibly could be happening in this home. Of course, one is the paranormal aspect, are maybe ghosts or spirits or entities forming these faces and forming these, making them move and change. There's another thought that it could be something called thoughtography. Now, I hate to burst anyone's bubble, but I don't believe in thoughtography. I don't think that this is what it is, but thoughtography is the process of, it's a telekinetic power that some psychics can have, where by their thoughts, they're able to project an image onto a surface. Now, I will say a lot of psychics have been tested in controlled situations, and not a single psychic has been able to prove that their powers are definitively real in a controlled scientific setting. And I say that because I do think that psychics could exist. They could have these smaller powers. Maybe they're just more intuitive, more aware. And I don't know. But anytime psychics have been tested with these more wild, outlandish claims, they've been very easily proven to be wrong or just lying about their abilities. I don't believe in thoughtography at all, but people believe that Maria may have been able to do this, whether intentionally or unintentionally. She was creating these faces. And there is a little bit of credence to this theory because they said that sometimes when the faces would change and morph or form in general, they would be in the expression that Maria had at the time that the face was formed. So I'll let you decide if you think thoughtography is a thing or not. I don't believe it. They also think that this could also be a thing because Maria ended up passing away February 3rd of 2004. And after this, there was a new wave of people saying the faces were changing and morphing even after her death. And this was proven to be falsified. The faces were not changing or moving in any way after she passed away. And people use this as more of the faces are fake and it's all a hoax. But I think this is just word of mouth got kind of out of hand because the faces never changed. Nobody was trying to change the faces or anything like that. This theory is also widely debunked by Spanish media itself. A newspaper at the time called El Mundo even published an article that was called "New Belméz Faces Faked by Ghostbusters and Municipal Government." Sounds like a pretty scathing article. And that article was published in November of 2004, so not too long after Maria's death. I guess these just rumors got out of hand after she passed away, and there is no definitive proof that any of the faces have changed. But people also use that as pointing towards Maria was faking these by using some kind of chemical compound or dye that was undetectable by science. Obviously, another theory is that this is all simply a hoax perpetuated by Maria and the family and the town for financial gain. Like I talked about before, I don't really buy the theory of financial gain because it doesn't quite make sense to me. And who could predict that a couple of faces appearing on a kitchen floor could create the kind of tourism that it was creating and the amount of people coming to see them for themselves? I just don't think that that's a thing that you could predict. It sounds so outlandish to me. There was a study conducted that tested for several possibilities, and this included pigmentation with a dark brownish substance, a mixture of soot and vinegar, and the aggressible action of a compound, like a chemical compound that changed the composition of the concrete and created a stain. Now, this study did find that there was a possibility that these faces could be formed with a common German product that could stain the concrete in a way that looks like the stains that the Belméz faces are made out of. Now, I will say that this theory does not have any basis in actual science. They did not test these faces for this exact chemical compound that is found in this product, and it sounds like they just made a swatch, said, yeah, that looks like the same color, this could possibly be used to recreate the Belméz faces. But that does not necessarily mean that the original Belméz faces were created using this exact product. If you know what I'm saying, if you understand, they're saying that this is a possibility. We can recreate it using this, but being able to recreate something does not mean that that's the exact way that they did it the first time. And that doesn't sound very scientific to me, just saying, yeah, you could use this, because they didn't ever prove that that product was actually used. Now, there was a different study that was conducted on La Pava, which is the very first face that was formed, where they used infrared photography to look at this face up more closely, and they did find that on top of the original image you could see paint bristles and strokes from a paintbrush. Now, again, I do not think this is definitive proof because they did not take a piece of La Pava and test it. I do think that there was paint on top of the original image, but that's the key. Paint on top of the original image. It does not prove that the original image was created exclusively using paint. And also, this exact one was taken and tested by a very reputable scientific laboratory, and they found there was no paint or dyes or pigment or anything used in the creation of La Pava. But now, years later, you take a picture and you can see paint bristles on top of the original image. That doesn't necessarily mean the entire thing is created with paint. To me, because La Pava is now on prominent display in this home, it's inset into the wall in the kitchen so that people can see it better when you go in to look at these faces. And since it is such a prominent piece of the display, I do think that they could have used paint on top of the original image to make it darker and make it more easily recognizable as a face for people that are further away. So you don't have to get as necessarily close to be able to see the face in the stain. And again, this doesn't prove that La Pava was created with paint. And again, it was scientifically tested and proven that it was not paint originally. So if they have used paint on top of it since then, that does not shock me, because it is like a touristy museum type thing where people can go inside and look, and enhancing something does not necessarily mean that it was faked originally. In 2014, the popular investigative journalism television show Cuarto Milenio carried on its own technical analysis of the Belméz faces, and they got very, very reputable people to come and test these faces for themselves. The research was investigated by a man named Jose Javier Garcinea. I apologize, that was terrible. He was a doctor of chemical engineering. They also brought in a forensic criminalist named Luis Alamancos, and they did just a barrage of testing on the Belméz faces, and they concluded they were not made with any kind of paint, and, quote, according to scientific knowledge and techniques employed in analysis, there is no external manipulation to the elements, end quote, in the faces. So basically what they're saying is, to the best of science and the technologies that they were able to use, they were not able to prove that these faces were created by anything that people would be able to get their hands on. The concrete was not manipulated or dyed or painted in any way. Now, Alamancos even went as far as to try and recreate these faces using the most popular theories that are at the time that are out there, including but not limited to concrete solvents, hydrochloric acid, and silver nitrate. These are some of the most popular theories of what could have created the faces and that Maria could have used to create these faces on her floor. Now, shocker, he was completely unable to recreate these faces at all, and he even concluded, quote, the words summarizing his opinion are absolute bewilderment. So he was completely unable to prove that there was any kind of manipulation to the concrete by a human being using any kind of chemicals that he could get his hands on. He even tested the German product that somebody had claimed earlier was able to recreate the faces, and he was not able to recreate these. Now, in general, there are 3 widely accepted theories of what could have possibly created the staining in the concrete, and that includes products that affect the chemical structure of cement, including oxidizing agents or acids, products that leave the cement intact but change the chemical structure upon contact with external agents such as light and or other chemical agents, and pigment in a vehicle or a resin. But as I have said, so many scientific tests have been conducted on these faces, and nothing has been able to conclude, Chief is back. Nothing has been able to conclude that these faces were made by a person using chemicals or dyes or paints in any way. So I'll leave it up to you if you think that this is some kind of paranormal event that is completely unexplained? Or do you think it's just a hoax perpetuated by the family and the town to create some kind of money and tourism? So please let me know your opinion down below. Please comment and tell me if you think it's a hoax or not. And I hate to sound like a stereotypical YouTuber here, but like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. Every Saturday I sit down and talk about some kind of unexplained event or something paranormal, haunted house, things like that. And every Wednesday I talk about any kind of unsolved true crime. If that sounds like it's up your alley, go ahead and subscribe. You can always unsubscribe later if you don't enjoy the content. And I hope y'all have an amazing Saturday and weekend, and I will hope to see you next week. Bye.